This November, the divided country of Moldova will hold a presidential election. And Moldovans are offered a choice between East and West. The pro-Russian incumbent, Igor Dodon, and his pro-European challenger, Maia Sandu. Former Prime Minister of Moldova and presidential candidate Maia Sandu joins us now. Thank you very much for your time. Look, how are you trying to divide what is a fiercely divided population of Moldova that it is you who should be the candidate as president?
Well, first of all, Moldova is at crossroads. It either becomes a functional state with competent leadership or it becomes a failed state. Functional state means, first of all, a state which stops corruption and a state which encourages businesses. And in turn, businesses create jobs, pay pensions and salaries. It is this simple, and this is what all the Moldovans want. For instance, now 1/3 of the Moldovan enterprises are on the verge of bankruptcy because the current authorities haven't been helping at all the economy. Today, most of the pensioners receive a pension which is less than the poverty line. And these are the issues that all the people feel, regardless of their geopolitical preferences. And we are trying to unite people around these objectives.
We'll come on to corruption in a little bit, but when you talk about the geopolitics of Moldova, you've said before about your foreign policy that it's time to relaunch a dynamic, responsible foreign policy. What would that be? What would that look like? And what's your sort of vision then of Moldova's political positioning?
Under the current president, the country's foreign policy has been totally unbalanced. For instance, Moldova has two neighbors, Romania and Ukraine. And under President Dodon, the relations with these countries have been completely frozen. The relations with EU and US have been going from bad to worse, because Igor Dodon has been pursuing, has been trying to establish good relations only with Russia. But even with Russia, he has been using this for his personal interests, not to solve countries' problems. And then we know that Russia doesn't provide any technical and development assistance. That's why we need to get back to a balanced external policy and to get back on track with good relations with Romania, with Ukraine, with EU and US. And yes, I've been promoting EU integration, Moldova's EU integration, and this is what I'm going to do as a president.
I mean, you've just laid out there really what are the tensions in the country, some of it leaning pro-West and some of it leaning pro-Russian. How would you seek to hold both of those in tow as president and find compromise?
As I said, most of the Moldovans, or probably all the Moldovans, want to have good living standards at home. They want to get rid of corruption. I should remind you that 1/3 of the population left the country because they didn't have any prospects at home. And these are the issues that we need to solve. And we need a president who is going to defend Moldova's national interests, regardless of whether this is in relations with Russia or this is in relations to other countries. And going back to a balanced external policy is something that we can ensure.
In terms of sort of drawing closer towards the EU, some of the things that you've hinted at and suggested at there, the one thing that the European Commission repeatedly call up Moldova about is concerns over rule of law, also corruption, as you've mentioned. If you were at the helm and your vision is to align values of Moldova more in line then with the EU, how do you aim to tackle those issues, corruption, rule of law?
You know, this has been one issue which determined me and my colleagues to enter politics, because when we discovered that Moldovan authorities had been stealing billions from the Moldovan population, we just thought that it's time to come and clean up the political class of Moldova. And we've been fighting to have independent justice, and we've been fighting to have strong anti-corruption institutions. We have started these reforms last year when I was Prime Minister. At some point, the corrupt politicians dismissed the government, but this is what we're going to pursue. This is one of the main objectives, stopping corruption, building a strong state with functional institutions. which will defend people, which will ensure the rule of law.
So would we see, let's say, maybe a radical overhaul of the justice system?
Definitely. Definitely, this is the reform that I proposed last year, cleaning up the justice sector, cleaning up the prosecution, and this has been one of the major issues why the corrupt political class dismissed the government. But this is one of the main objectives of my presidential program.
When we get to the outcome of election, I know you've already warned of a sort of Belarus-type scenario, potentially mass unrest, street protests. To what extent, if that did develop, do you think Moldova would actually be able to cope, financially with something like that happening, but also dealing with that level of social unrest?
We want free and fair elections. This is what we keep telling the authorities. The problem is that the incumbent president, Igor Dodon, knows that he cannot win the elections, cannot win the second mandate in free and fair elections, because by now people saw that he's corrupt, that he's lying, and that he's incompetent. So he is trying to rig the elections. We have been sending these strong messages to prevent him from doing that. But in case he will pursue his plans, we are warning him that people will go to the streets, because this is what people tell us. We have had the experiences of 2016, parliamentary elections in 2019, when the elections were not free and fair, and people said, enough is enough.
Can I just interject and ask why it is that this time round you are so confident in stating the fact that you don't think these elections are going to be free and fair? What evidence are you basing that on?
Well, we already see things happening. We have the past experience when, for instance, Plahotniuk's regime, together with Dodon, organized and bought votes from Transnistrian region. This is the breakaway region. And we had plenty of evidence in the press about the fact that people were organized and transported, and they were paid for votes. Then we see on the right bank of Moldova, people on the right bank of Nistru, people being again paid, especially the poor people, because this is what the corrupt Moldovan politicians did.
Can I just finally ask you, one of the biggest challenges, immediate challenges, that you or the current president will have to face on election is the coronavirus pandemic. Cases are steadily rising in Moldova. What are you going to do to try and tackle that, to keep the population safe, but not cripple the economy?
Well, the situation is really very bad, and the first thing to be done is testing more. The Moldovan authorities have not been listening to the advice of the medical sector. They've been testing very few people. They have not been taking measures to isolate those who are sick. And then, of course, we need to help the medical sector, which is on the edge. To help the medical workers. These are the first things to be done. But in terms of the economic crisis, we also need to act immediately, because, as I said, 1/3 of the Moldovan companies are on the verge of bankruptcy, and we need to find money and to support, including financially, some of these companies, especially the small and medium enterprises.
Maia Sandu, thank you very much. The former Prime Minister and presidential candidate to run Moldova.